Hello everyone, and welcome back to our next installment of the Path 2409 timeline series for Star Trek Online. Today we're going to be talking about volumes 11 and 12. Raids on civilian ships and settlements along the borders of the Klingon Empire and Gorn hegemony rose dramatically in 2390. Starfleet identified at least 8 places near the border where the Nausicaans were constructing bases hidden in asteroid belts or nebulae. Starfleet Command did not consider these bases to be a major threat, but the Federation Transport Union, which represented a large number of civilian freighter captains, demanded that Starfleet increase its patrols in the border regions and offer additional protections for civilian shipping traffic. The debate on what to do raged for much of the year, and the few Starfleet vessels assigned to the region struggled to deal with the swift raider attacks. By the time a starship could respond to a distress signal, it was often too late to catch the Nausicaan ships. The tensions between the Gorn and the Klingon Empire, as well as increasing Nausicaan activity in the region, put Starfleet in position of having to balance the need for defense with the Federation's deteriorating relationship with the Klingons. Assigning more starships to the border of the Klingon space would be seen as a hostile act by the hardliners on the Klingon High Council, and tensions were already high because of the ships that Starfleet was using to reinforce the Romulan border with the Klingon Empire. The best-case scenario for the Federation, analysts agreed, is if the Klingon and Gorn could find a peaceful solution before the conflict had a chance to engulf nearby worlds. To this end, the Federation offered to mediate talks between the Gorn and the Klingons at a neutral location. Neither party was overeager to accept human meddling in a personal dispute, and preliminary talks to hash out the details of the peace conference dragged on for weeks. The process came to an abrupt halt when Chancellor Martok announced that the Klingons would not participate in any negotiations until Starfleet withdrew all of its ships from the Romulan-Klingon border. While the campaigns against the Romulans and the Gorn were both extremely popular on Kronos, projections by the Klingon Defense Force showed that the Empire's resources were being stretched thin by a two-front war. The KDF had 3 recommendations: a rapid increase in ship production, eliminating some of the blocks to non-commissioned soldiers rising to the ranks of officer, and possibly scaling back the Romulan war in the short term. While there had been victories in Romulan space, the disorganized, displaced Romulans were not deemed to be an immediate threat to the Empire. The Gorn-Nausicaan alliance was. Ultimately, the Klingons decided to slow their advance into Romulan space. However, they continued to garrison and defend the territory gained in the 2389 campaign. The Romulan colony worlds were starting to develop a loose network of alliances and rivalries, but by 2390, none of the potential Romulan leaders were able to unify the worlds under one banner. Left to their own devices, some of the worlds looked to allies outside of the Romulan Star Empire. On stardate 67620.54, the Romulan colony of Talvath formally requested Federation protection and offered to open talks that could lead Talvath applying for Federation membership. Some saw this as the first step to the dissolution of the Romulan Star Empire. A bright spot on the Romulans was Admiral Taris, who was organizing the remaining Romulan ships into a new fleet. In areas with holes in the chains of command, Taris approached each ship captain personally, and outside observers expected her to have the Romulan military fully operational within 7 months. Federation analysts warned that a strong fleet could quickly overwhelm the weak leaders of colony worlds, and that the Romulans may soon be under military control. For her part, Taris did not publicly express an interest in governing the civilian population, and ordered the focus under her control to concentrate on relief efforts and defense of the border regions. On Cardassia Prime, the Detapa Council spent most of the year mustering support for a slate of reform measures designed to expand personal freedoms and promote business development. While the population enjoyed its newfound liberty and the Orleanan spiritual movement flourishes, many Cardassians were uncertain about this new direction for their world. The Council's task was complicated by Gul Madred and his followers, who used the expansions in the freedom of speech and assembly to organize rallies promoting the return to the true ways of Cardassian union. A task force made up of scientists assigned to the USS Pasteur, commanded by Captain Beverly Crusher, and the Cardassian Ministry of Science announced that it had found a possible cure for the Yarman-Fell syndrome. The compound, synthesized from a rare flower that grew in the most remote areas of Cardassia Prime, could not be replicated. Because of the limited supply of the drug, it was expected to be several years before the treatment was fully tested and ready for public use. On Earth, the Federation's Supreme Court agreed to hear oral arguments from a group of hollow novel publishers and programmers seeking to block the class action lawsuit asking for civil rights for holograms. The group hired a retired Starfleet Rear Admiral, Philippa Louise, of the Judge Advocate General's office to lead their case, and she argued that appearing sentient does not automatically mean a hologram is sentient. Unless the holograms could determine to be intelligent and self-aware, the Acts of Cumberland and the Federation Constitution did not offer them full protection. The Soong Foundation argued that without full holoemitter technology, it could not bring witness to the court and to speak to their own defense, and the court rules precluded remote testimony in such matters such as this. The justices granted the Soong Foundation a quick delay. In 2390, the USS Enterprise E returned from a survey of the McAllister C5 Nebula. Captain Data reported that the Enterprise found residual signs of multiple quantum singularities in the area of the nebula that corresponded to those used by a Delta Quadrant race known as Species 8472 to cross from their home dimension. Unfortunately, the properties of the protostellar nebula in which the singularities were found made definitive identification impossible. If these singularities were used by Species 8472, it was the first sign of them near Federation space. Raids by Nausicaan pirates continued to disrupt shipping lines on the edges of Federation space. Angry at what they perceived as a lack of response by Starfleet and the Federation government, the Federation Transport Union recommended that members refuse official cargoes. This caused a crisis for the Federation government. With so many Starfleet vessels assigned to Romulan and Cardassian relief efforts, the government relied heavily on civilian ships for routine deliveries to Federation worlds. But the Union's actions threatened everything from shipments of replicators to Alpha Centauri to emergency medical supplies destined for Rarita 4. Federation President Nan Bako met with the leaders of the Transport Union, but the Union refused to budge on what it said was an essential safety issue. Too many ships and too many crews were being lost to Nausicaan raids. Presidential aid suggested that Starfleet vessels assigned to exploration could be rerouted to border defense, but many of those ships were in deep space and it would take them months to return. Starfleet Command reluctantly agreed to pull back from the Klingon-Romulan border and reassign those ships to patrolling the shipping routes. Leaders of some of the Romulan colony worlds howled with indignation that the Federation had broken promises of protection, but those voices were silenced by a sharp rebuke from Admiral Terris. "We are Romulan. We fight our own battles. I would rather see Romulans die with pride in their hearts and swords in their hands instead of mewing for protection like scared younglings." After Starfleet withdrew from the Romulan border, Chancellor Martok agreed to honor his promise to participate in Federation-mediated peace talks with the Gorn. Representatives from the Klingons, Gorn, and Nausicaans converged on Deep Space K7 for the conference, and the Federation sent some of its most celebrated diplomats to oversee the talks. Initial progress appeared promising, but 2 days into the conference, Ambassador Zogozin of the Gorn was seriously injured by an explosive device hidden in a serving cart. The Klingon, Gorn, and Nausicaan delegations made plans for immediate departure, but all are blocked from leaving the station by Starfleet security, which locked down the station during the hunt for Zogozin's attacker. 2 days after the attack, Jeddah, a Klingon officer with ties to the extremist groups opposed to Martok's rule, was found dead. Security officers determined that Jeddah was killed by a disruptor blast at close range and shoved out in an airlock hours after the explosion that injured Zogozin. If Jeddah's body had not been snagged on a piece of station's hull, it may have been lost. Forensic evidence proved that Jeddah was the person who planted the explosive that injured the Gorn ambassador, but his killer was never found. Journals left behind in Jeddah's quarters indicate that his intended target may have been the Federation negotiation team, all of whom escaped unscathed. After the attack on the peace conference at Deep Space K7, talks between the Klingons and Gorns broke down completely. The Klingons pushed their advance into Gorn territory, and the Gorn, mindful of the need to protect their homeworld, moved ships away from their outlying territories. King Slathus approached the Lethians for additional assistance, but most outside analysts believe that the Gorn did not have the spare resources to hire Lethinian mercenaries and still pay the prices demanded by the Nausicaans for their support. Victory for the Klingon Empire seemed to be only a matter of time. After Starfleet pulls back from the Klingon-Romulan border, hardliners of the Klingon High Council pushed for a resumption of the stalled Romulan campaign. Martok and his followers urged caution, preferring to concentrate on the Gorn War and building up Klingon defense forces to pre-Dominion war levels. Rebuffed by Martok, Chancellor Jimbok gathered ship commanders loyal to his house and the houses of his allies and invaded the Zeta Pictoria system. There, they clashed with a Romulan fleet commanded by Admiral Taris, and the Romulans forced the Klingons to retreat. Survivors of the battle reported the appearance of a highly advanced starships on the Romulan side, but their existence could not be confirmed. Martok ordered Klingon intelligence to look into the reports in more detail, and the Chaos Battle Group was dispatched to investigate. Federation political analysts said that the Klingon hardliners campaign into the Zeta Pictoria system was a failure. Jimbok's point was made. If Martok was unwilling to lead the Klingons into battle, there were others who would do so. The High Council began to divide between those who were loyal to Martok and those who wanted new leadership. Taris's victory over the Zeta Pictoria system rallied the Romulans, who were desperately seeking a sign of their former glory. Raytor III was the first to proclaim Taris as the leader of the Romulan Star Empire, quickly followed by H&R Prime and more than a dozen other worlds. In an address broadcast throughout the Empire, Taris said, "I am a military commander, and I would prefer to remain so. The seals of politics are rife with submerged hazards and hidden perils, and a wise person does well to avoid them. But my empire calls, and I cannot resist her plea." Taris called on the leaders of the colony worlds to meet at Raytor III to select representatives for a new Romulan Senate and to make plans for the new capital. A Federation operative inserted into the fleet that departed Romulan space with Sela in 2386 reported that Sela and her followers landed on Makar, an M-class planet in the Beta Quadrant, with abundant supplies of decalithium and heavy metals. A humanoid race with technology equivalent to Earth's Iron Age inhabited two of Makar's temperate southern continents. But Sela saw the population as an additional natural resource, and within weeks her forces had hundreds of Makarans working in the mines. The operative also reported that Sela's ship picked up a signal that was similar to an artificial quantum singularity that the Romulans used to power their warp drives, as well as signs of massive gravitational fields. Sela dispatched 2 ships to investigate these anomalies. The Cardassian Detapa Council scored a major victory when it concluded negotiations with the Ferengi Grand Nagus Rom for assistance in rebuilding their industrial complexes. Rom agreed to provide the funding to rebuild factories, design houses, and replication facilities, as well as return the Cardassian Ministry of Culture several valuable Genovan artifacts sacred to the followers of Aurelianus. In return, Rom received exclusive trade agreements to distribute Cardassian trade goods once the factories reopened. While Rom was mocked by many Ferengi for his lack of lobes when it comes to business, if the deal succeeded, it would be one of the most lucrative arrangements in recent memory. On Earth, the Federation Supreme Court ruled in favor of Philippa Luvis and the holonovel publishers and programmers she represented, saying that the Acts of Cumberland would not apply to non-sentient, holographic, or artificial life forms. The justice returned the Soong Foundation's class action lawsuit to a lawyer court to determine what defines sentience in a legal sense. Not content with pursuing its agenda only in the courts, the Soong Foundation launched a campaign to lobby Federation worlds to support an amendment that would add rights for artificial life forms to the Federation Constitution. Responding to the possibility of species 8472 appearing in Federation space, Starfleet Command assigned a task force to investigate any possible appearances of the race. A skilled team of scientists, diplomats, and security experts began to look into any signs that the species was in the Alpha Quadrant and formulate possible plans of action. At the start of their research, the team conducted extensive interviews with the crews of the USS Enterprise E, which found the anomalies in the McAllister C5 Nebula, and former crew members of the USS Voyager, which was the only Starfleet ship known to have definitive contact with the mysterious aliens. And citing the success and extremely diverse crew of the USS Titan and her sister ships, Starfleet assigned a committee to consider expanding the admission standards to Starfleet Academy and to provide more opportunities for races that are formally allied with the Federation but are not full members of worlds. Not everyone knows a Starfleet captain and can get a personal recommendation, said spokesperson Marie Durant. That doesn't mean they won't be fine officers.